little over a year ago, I graduated college with a math degree, specifically a pure math degree. There's applied math and pure math, and pure math is a little bit more theoretical, right? If you don't know me, I've been doing social media for 10 years. I actually have my million subscriber YouTube channel. I have over 2 million subs on YouTube, but across all my channels, I do about 250 million views a month. I also run a company with multiple employees with 25 plus clients that do basically social media marketing agency type. We build the organic social top of funnel for them. Also do a bunch of angel investments on the side. A lot of math involved in that as well. However, my math degree, I've never directly used it, and a little bit of probability in my day-to-day, but generally I don't use a single thing from my math degree. However, it was probably one of the most important decisions I've made. It's one of the most impactful. So this is how my math degree, I'll do this in 20 minutes or less, maybe it runs a little long. This is how my math degree has completely shaped the way I see business, finances, relationships, like risk-taking, romance, relationships. I know that sounds a little crazy. I'll get into that in a second. And you don't need to be technical in any of these topics to get something from this video. I actually was in low math in high school. A little bit of the reason why I did the math degree was to prove people wrong, but then it ended up being great. The higher up you go in math, the more interesting it gets and the less kind of just like churning through numbers, right? That's always been a problem for me, is like I lose focus for 1 second, then the whole equation breaks. However, there's a bunch of different subcategories in math that are covered. Everything, I covered things from very practical, like probability, statistics, that kind of understanding, as well as the theoretical. Understanding proofs, understanding axiomatic thinking, which is actually how people think. I think that was the most interesting. However, if I'm gonna go straight into it, probability and statistics are probably the most obviously applicable, I should say. I think the biggest takeaway, the one biggest takeaway from everything, is just having a fundamental understanding of expected value. I don't know the last time I truly calculated the EV on something. However, I always think of every decision I make to some degree through the lens of expected value. What is expected value? Very simply, and also for practical terms and practical applications, expected value is simply, what if I make an action, what are the probabilities of all the outcomes, and then what is the net gain or loss of those outcomes? I'll give you a very simple example. You take a coin. If I flip it, let's say it's a true 50-50. If I flip it and it's a heads, I get $10. And if I flip it and it's a tails, I lose $10. There's a 50% chance I get $10, and there's a 50% chance I lose $10. The expected value in terms of dollars is 0. Because if I flip it enough times, it's up, down, up, down. If you do enough of that, right, you're gonna approach 0 as your total sum. However, this is the very technical, like using dollars as your quantity. I want you to think about expected value in more general terms. If you were to make an action, let's go straight into it. If I don't know, let's see, you're a guy, you see a girl, you think she's really pretty, right? What is the expected value? And hear me out on this. Actually, seriously, hear me out. What is the expected value of asking some girl out, right? Well, let's look at all the possible outcomes, removing the tail cases, right? She might, I don't know, have a Navy SEAL boyfriend, you get shot in the face. Like, okay, let's remove the things that are ridiculous, right? Let's use it practically. Let's say that 9 out of 10 times you're gonna get a no. She's not gonna go on a date with you, whatever. Let's say 9 out of 10 times. You might have better odds than that, but when I look at this, I look at 9 out of 10, I'm gonna get a no. Okay, so 9 out of 10 odds for the no, and then you have a 1 out of 10 odds for the yes. So to do the expected value, you then need to quantify all of the options and the net gain or the net loss that you incur. All right, let's look at the 9 out of 10 for a no. What is the actual impact? Let's put it on a scale of 100. Let's use numbers, make it simple. I'm gonna put it as a -1, because you really don't lose anything. If you can truly perceive it that the only thing you're gonna lose is a little bit of an ego hit, which for some of you guys, you might be in a position where you are still building up your confidence, so an ego hit might be actually larger than -1. But if you're at a point where you can truly look at this in real terms, it's a -1. It's a small little mark, right? You might get a little ego hit, you might get a little embarrassment, you might have a little tiny social repercussion. That number actually might get larger if you're in a small group of people and you ask out a bunch of people. That number is actually gonna get larger because you kind of spread around that you're asking people. However, for all practical terms, -1. But 1 out of 10 chance she says yes. That's a plus 100. This girl, or if you're into guys or whoever, I don't care, right? Your net value outcome in your life, let's say it's plus 100. Then all of a sudden, if you look at the odds, okay, well, 9 out of 10 times -1 plus 1 out of 10 times 100, the expected value, the EV of that play is actually very positive. You might be thinking, well, Connor, you're picking arbitrary numbers. And it's true. In life, you can't be as precise as maybe you'd want to be. However, you can kind of, and I don't sit down and think, well, I'm going to give a number to this exactly. I'm not. You can't, right? That's a waste of time. However, I always think, like, if I'm going to ask someone for dinner or something, what is the net value for me? So at a minimum, cool experience. And then even more importantly, like at some point, you eventually want to find a long-term romantic partner who's compatible with you. You might be 20 dinners away from that one person, but it's that one conversation that gets you everything. So if you look at it in terms as well as like your collective expected value, what you're trying to do there, then that actually plus 100 is even larger, assuming you can stomach the -1, and that's even a smaller number. If you do a quick hand calculation in your brain, that is a very positive, you should always do that. Because the net value, the sum of the positive is significantly higher. Think about this in business too. One thing that I've learned is that I had to take so many more calls with random people, sales calls, and most of the time I would get a no. Or I have to take multiple calls and eventually be a no. But you just need one yes to change your life. Well, for me, it doesn't change my life, but it's it's quite nice when I get a yes for my business. You have to look at the net, like on these sales calls. Assuming you're not scamming, or assuming you're not breaking FTC compliance, or assuming you're not doing something like that, you actually have very little negative. And if you're a good salesperson, you just give value and then you try to put someone in the right direction, or actually it's all net positive. So you have a very, very little negative sign because you are spending time, right? There is a value to your time. So you are losing a little bit. However, the expected value of just taking another call is high. Especially if you have a good funnel and you have a good system, you have a good product, all that consider, right? You also have to think when you're thinking about probability, it's very tied into risk. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. I think people, and I hate to say, people are thinking about it wrong and I'm thinking about it right. It's just a way to think about it. However, I am a little bit uncomfortable with the way that people price risk into their decisions. So if you're a finance person, and I'm a little bit of a finance person, big stock guy, I think I signed like 4 safes, which are for angel investments, private equity type things in the last month. So I'm not a genius, but I do a little bit of that. It's interesting. I'll talk about that later. When you're thinking through pricing risk, right? So if you're a finance person, this might come a little bit, easier. You can also think about it in terms of expected value, but then you also have to think about risk in the long term. You almost need like a bigger model than a one-time decision. Like, what's the EV of this one decision? You got to think about it bigger. I see a lot of people, especially with all these AI tools coming out. One thing I've had everyone in my company on the weekends, I'm like, you got to spend 5 hours on Claude Code. You got to figure this out, just because it's crazy how fast things are changing. It's crazy how things are being implemented. And I'm looking at kind of traditional fields, law, accounting, a lot of other white-collar jobs. I'm not saying those are going away tomorrow. I'm not even saying that those are 100% going away, even with a long timeline, because a lot of them are people-to-people relationships. Never discount that. However, when someone is looking at a traditionally safe job, I'll go to school for 4 years plus 6 years for master's or whatever, and then I know I'm going to probably get 70K out of school, and then it's going to go up, and it'll be 100, then 200, then 250, probably my peak, or 300. You're calculating out that there's a kind of you're using your past results. I mean, think about something like Warren Buffett. Past returns do not indicate future returns, right? Or past results do not imply future returns strictly. I think a lot of people make this mistake when you're pricing your risk for your future. I think that a lot of these traditional jobs that people are taking because they're not risky, I think you're just mispricing the risk. I think that they could be very stable, and you could have a theoretically stable career, and you can't really predict that out into the future. However, I think that people, when they're making decisions, and this is when I'm trying to poach people to join my company, I have to really try to reframe the way that they look at risk, right? I think that, yeah, there's always risk in joining a startup. Well, if you join me, I'll pay you pretty well. I'm not gonna lie, I took all the risk for you. You're welcome. However, if you're looking at this, oh, well, it's a smaller company, there's risk implied, I want to go into this career path. I don't think you're looking at the risk correctly. I don't think you're pricing that in correctly. And kind of looping it back, because I almost want to talk about probability. I want to talk about analysis, which I think is even more interesting than I have some other things I want to cover. So thinking about more kind of intuitive understanding of variance, intuitive understanding of just general curves of probability, right? Actually very applicable in my day-to-day for social media. When you look at your results in social media and you post a lot of content, you are going to have variance in your results. There's so many factors and so many variables when you post a piece of content on social media. You can try to optimize for, I want a good click-through rate, I want a good retention curves, I want people to stay, I want a good swipe away rate. But there's so many variables out there, you can't control for all of them. You can't predict all of them. This isn't chess, this is poker. A lot of life, love chess. I'm not very good. I have a lot of respect for it. It's all the information's on the table. Life is a lot closer to poker. Or chess with dice, right? Some probability involved. And there's a whole discussion about is everything deterministic, or is it probabilistic, or is there something at the quantum level where it's probabilistic? But that's all just speaking. It's not actually practical, right? For all practical terms, there is at least probability in your decision making because not all the information's on the table. There's this really great book. It's called by Annie Duke, I think. It's like Thinking in Bets. This book, actually, the first 2 chapters, I didn't really read the rest because it was fine, but like sometimes with the book, it's like you get to the point right away, you're like, thank you very much. I really only read the first couple of chapters of this book and I glanced through the rest. It just didn't kind of repeated the point. Extremely important for thinking. So there's this professional poker player, Annie Duke, I think. I think that's her last name. Apologies if I get that wrong. So she would be hired as a consultant to go to these big Fortune 500 companies. And what she would do, and this is a really interesting thought experiment, and it's on this topic, is she would go to these executives and she would say, tell me your best decision you made this year and tell me the worst decision you made this year. And time after time again, the best decision that someone made was related to a great result, and the worst decision that someone made was related to the worst result. However, you have to think about your decision-making process, and this goes back to expected value. If you make let's go to poker, and I don't know poker that well. I love the math behind it. I bought this probability book from this poker player who's a mathematician. There's big overlap of these, 2 Sigma Jane Street quant people that also make a lot of money, or PhDs in math make a lot of money in poker. But the way that you approach it, right? Let's say you have a hand that will win 90% of the time, and you play that hand and you lose because someone had a crazy hand. Was that a good decision or a bad decision? Well, you lost. Doesn't mean it's a bad decision. Because if you play positive EV hands, and this is true in life and business and a lot of other topics, right? You are going to win in the long run, and your total, you have to look at the total return on this, is going to be significantly better. So the point of that book by Annie Duke was like, you have to look at your decisions and the expected value connected with your decisions, not strictly based on your outcomes. If you buy a lottery ticket and win, well, sure, you go back, like, of course you want to buy the lottery ticket, but is buying a lottery ticket a good idea? Generally no, because your EV is negative. It's actually significantly negative. Sure, you could play variance and like you will have some crazy results, right? Another thing in statistics that's pretty important to know, broadly understand variance, and then also broadly understand a normal curve, and then also understand 1 sigma, 2 sigma, 1 or 2 standard deviations, right? 1 sigma, 2 sigma, standard deviation, same thing. Results. What does that mean, right? So if you have a normal curve, you have the 1 sigma, 2 sigma, then you have 3 plus, but let's really look at 1 or 2. There is I have to remember exactly, I think it's like the 95th percentile is 2 sigma from the right. So on social media, when I talk to clients, I'm like, look, you're gonna have variance in your results. If a video does ass, doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad video. If a bunch of videos in a row do ass, well, that's correlate. You can actually draw a trend line, if that makes sense. You also gotta look at sample size for your data. If you conduct a study and you talk to one person, then it's 100% that, right? Oh, they said this. That sample size is too small. You need enough data. However, you're never gonna truly have all the data in the world that you need, so you need to have a gut sense of what's a large enough sample size, right? I don't even know where I was going with that thought. So I need to circle it back to something important. And what I'm going to circle it back to is 1 or 2 standard deviations. So if you're talking about social media and you're talking about, oh, a video doesn't do well. Well, sometimes videos don't do well. I posted a video, and this is going back to 1 or 2 standard deviations. I posted a video on my Instagram. It was completely normal. It was a standard video I do. I pay attention to my data. I look at it very closely. I iterate. You always want to iterate on your data, take your past results and make slight changes based on that data, but don't totally change things up. It's a totally normal video. It got 20 million views in 7 days. That was a 2+, probably even a 3 standard deviation result. You always want to pay attention to when things go crazy well, because there's a little bit of randomness, but there's always something there. However, I also posted a video that did like 40K views, and that's cool. It's below my average, and it's not that great for short form social. However, I didn't go in and freak out and never do that style of video again, because I have enough data to show that that style of videos actually performs quite well. There's just variables that I'm not going to be able to see. Having a good sense of probability, expected value, being able to price risk, variance in your results, but also understanding that 2 sigma results is actually, you should pay attention to that in a lot of places in life. You usually don't get super lucky in the right direction unless it's lottery tickets. You need to know the parameters of what you're working on. It's very important. However, another part of math that seems less applicable, but in my opinion might be even more applicable, is logic. Oh, logic. It's not even math. You can actually become a logician. This guy, Kirk Earl, is a logician. Very interesting. I'll talk about him later. Logic isn't just something that is like, oh, I'm being logical, right? It's actually a formal language, and you can study it. It is the formal language that is the underlying of mathematics, which is the underlying of biology and chemistry and physics and everything, right? Logic is actually, everyone's like, math's the layer of everything. No, logic is the layer to math, which is the layer to everything, right? I took this class. It's called real analysis. You can also take complex analysis. There's real analysis too. There's a lot of different variants of this. Well, not variants, but different more extensions. Or complex analysis is real analysis is dealing with, basically, you have to prove all the calculus and all the stuff that comes before it, which is, everything else, right, to lead up to calculus. Complex analysis is just doing analysis in the complex field, and that gets a little wonky, but real analysis is great. Basically, in this class, you had to prove all of calculus, more or less, there's a lot of calculus, from nothing. Well, almost nothing. The way that we think, and this is where this actually got really interesting, because I don't care about precisely and formally proving a limit. That's no application to my life. However, the fact that I had to use our logic system, I was given a few things I could work with. I'll give you one of them. It's commutativity, I think, is one of the axioms. I'll talk about axioms in a second. It's like A plus B is the same thing as B plus A. Not always true in the complex field, but we're talking about real analysis here. You're given a couple rules, and you're given logic. So given a couple rules and logic, you need to then create theorems, which is you take the rules, you take logic, and it gets to a result. Now you can take that result, plus your axioms, plus logic, and build from there. It's like you have a couple things you can start building with, and then you have to be really, really, really formal going up from there. I don't use any of my real analysis directly. Now, I'm not proving an integral for anything like that. Like, dude, I'm not doing that. However, it taught me how to think formally, and it also taught me how people think and how there's some flaws in it. I'll talk about that in a second. An axiom is simply something that we are just saying is true. We do not prove it. If you try to prove anything, you're actually going to find this recursive problem. If you're a computer science person, recursion, base case, you get to a base case, right? If you try to prove anything, right? Okay, let's say, think about something you believe. Okay, why do you believe it? You believe it because of this. Okay, well then why do you believe this? Well, you believe it because of this. And you can keep going back, and you will eventually get to a base point where you just believe it. You don't prove it, you just believe it. That is what is an axiom. And one thing that I learned, and this is how you think about everything. Any opinion you have is axiomatic-based logic, or you're just not thinking about it and it's not logical at all, but like assuming, using logic, there's these things called axioms. One big rule, huge. Always check your axioms with anything you believe in life. And this class actually taught me to always think about my axioms. What do I believe is fundamentally true? And I build my assumptions off of that. Such as you should always check your, like if you believe something and you don't have a logic train before it, then it's an axiom to some degree. It's kind of, there's certain things that I believed over time that I've changed because I've gone back and thought, well, why do I believe this? There might be something wrong with your logic along that train. It could be circular reasoning, could be a lot of other things. You could have something implies something else, and that implication is actually very questionable. A lot of ways to go about it like that. But you should always check your axioms. You should always check about how you think. There was this guy in the 40s. He was one of I feel like polymaths don't exist anymore. Polymath is just someone who is a savant genius in multiple fields. Kurt Gödel in the 40s, genius, mathematician, physicist, but also a logician. It was, who was it? Yeah, it was Einstein when he was, I think it was at Stanford or what, maybe it wasn't Stanford. He was at one of these, Cambridge, he was a professor at one of these places. And he said, the only reason I'm a professor here, just so we make this clear, is because of my walks back home with Kurt Gödel. Right, Einstein thought this guy was the greatest guy. So pretty big praise. If you're interested in more of the philosophical applications of logic, you should look, and it's a very formal technical paper, and there's a lot of, you could really say like, okay, well, can you really, expand this beyond the technicals, but just hear me out. Gödel had these two interesting, tightly related, they're very similar, but these two interesting results. It's called Gödel's incompleteness theorem, well, theorems, because there's theorem 1 and theorem 2, but essentially, Gödel was able to use logic, our system of thinking, to prove that our system of thinking was incomplete. Basically, with our recursive axiomatic system, you can create a system that is perfectly complete and can prove everything to be true. So what does this mean? The way that we think about the world, from the way that we perceive physics to the way that we perceive relationships and politics and business, we will never have a truly complete and airtight view of the world and everything because of the way that our system works. And you might be like, well, what is a system that works? Maybe there isn't an answer that we can comprehend. Maybe we don't have enough neurons connecting in here. Man, I don't know. Maybe ChatGPT number 10,000 will come up with a better system and have a better approach. Probably not. ChatGPT is all linear algebra. I took a couple linear algebra classes. Extremely interesting as well. Always check your axioms. Could be a problem. Generally as well, optimal stopping. So kind of going somewhere else. Optimal stopping and this dealing with multivariables. There's this idea in mathematics of optimal stopping. If you're going for multiple variables at once, there's diminishing returns. That one I think is probably a little bit more common, diminishing returns. And I see this so often in life, right? What actually matters? The things that I'm trying to optimize for all of these at once, I want my health to be pretty good. If you're sick, it's like if you go to a billionaire and he's sick in bed, or she's sick in bed, look at me, anyone can be a billionaire, bro. No, but if they're sick in bed and they feel awful and they can't do anything, they would 100% trade you, wire you $1 billion if you can make them feel good again. They'd start from zero. So you never want to destroy your health. And also wealth, look, at the end of the day, like you do want to make money. It's like, yeah, what do you want to make your money for? That's something I always think about as well. For me, I'm like, you know what? I like a couple cool things. I like the ability to do what I want to do. If I just want to pay for dinner for a bunch of people and I can just do that, that's exciting. If I can go travel somewhere on a whim, that's interesting. But then for me as well, right, I would like to have kids. I think if you look at, it's probably a good idea to have kids. Everyone's different, don't get me wrong, but generally it's like, you don't want to fight with the subconscious. You don't want to fight with your genes too much. You were supposed to have kids. You should probably do that. Or certain cases, not the case, of course. But generally for me, I'm like, I should probably have kids. There's a big debate of how much of your kids, of someone put together, built in their mind, is like at conception and then also nurture, right? Nature versus nurture. Look, at the end of the day, if your height is because of your genetics and your eye color is because of your genetics, there's probably a lot of other things, such as your tendency for mental health issues, probably how smart you are, just how connected your neuron, like how much neuron plasticity do you have? I'm not a scientist, I might have made that word up, right? However, for me, it's also, I know that I don't know, and I know that there probably is a lot of data that says there's at least some amount when your brain is the most plastic when you're a young kid, when you're 1 to 5. Maybe you don't retain a lot of those memories, but that forms so much of you. So for me, I would like to make a lot of money relatively quick. I'm going to take a little bit more risk when I'm adjusting for risk, because it's important for me to be there with my kids when they're 1 to 8, when they're 1 to 5. It's important always, of course, but if that is the second most time, like if that is the second most time that I can have an impact on these kids, first of all, pick a good partner. All I'm going to say is, like, not only for your life, not only for what you care about, but also for the sake of your kids, you should probably have a good partner. And by good partner, I mean, are they stable? Are they relatively happy people? Are they smart? Are they, caring? Not just for you and not just for the nurture part, but also because a lot of that gets passed on. All I'm saying is, like, I don't think it's a terrible idea for romantic partners to casually be like, hey, you should take this personality quiz. It's super fun. And then actually just take a good look at it. I don't know. And you should pay attention to that. However, for me, it's also really important, like, if I can have an impact in the first couple of years of a kid being alive, then I want to be able to basically drop everything, maybe do some, like, venture capital or something that's, like, kind of fake, but it's real, super fun, but it's kind of fake, right? And be able to spend all that time with my kids and not have to be, up till 2 a.m., which is most nights for my company, right? This is the time to put in that for those returns. So when we're talking about diminishing returns as well, you shouldn't forget about all the other things that matter. At the end of the day, it's like, what might matter might just be your relationships with friends, family, and romantic partners. For me, romantic partner, there's a lot of question about there's a lot of question when you look at the divorce rates. Are you supposed to be with someone when you marry them for the rest of your life? I would like to be. But statistically, maybe we should culturally be like, hey, we had a 15-year run and that was awesome. Maybe we don't have to be together forever just because of a piece of paper. And some people said we should be, right? But diminishing returns, before I get too far off this point, it is a mistake. And the smarter people than me have told me this. I'm 23, I'm an idiot, I don't know anything. However, I do know one thing, and that's I don't know anything. So I always try to pay attention to people smarter than me. I try to, I think having mentors in your life, whether through books or online or best in person, you can't always get the in-person people for what you want. Majority of the smartest people in the world are dead, so you can only read their books. You should make sure that these smart people are telling me, don't sacrifice one thing to do something else. For example, there's this one person in my life who's 20 years older. I have a ton of respect for him. He's, like big mentor in my life. And one thing that he's told me that I've stuck with is do things in your 20s that you want to do in your 20s. Look, I love running my business. I love posting on social media. I love reading books. I love doing all this stuff. I'm not someone who loves to go out. I'm not someone who wants to do all these things, but I push myself to do crazy things, such as for spring break, me and three of my other buddies, right? We went to Iceland, got in a camper van, and went around the country. Because I know I'm not going to do that when we're 30. I mean, it'd be really hard to. You should do things in your 20s that you only want to do in your 20s, because maybe you get a lot of money and you can do them when you're 40, but they're not going to be the same experience. You also can't do it with the same people. I've seen so many people go 100% into, oh man, I got to just make all this money, and when I'm 35, then I'm going to make it work. I don't know if that's true. I think if you look at data and you look at people and you look at, it's like, do you really want to be Elon Musk? It's like, I have a lot of respect for a lot of things. Some stuff I'm like, dude, what are you doing? But someone like Jeff Bezos, I have a lot of respect for what they've done in business, but I wouldn't want their lives. I look at someone like Elon Musk. He does not have health in check, and he just relationship-wise, he's like 10 wives and 50 kids. And that's fine if that's the life you want to live, but I'm also looking at what's the life I want to live. So I do want to make money, and I'm currently doing all right there. However, I'm also just I don't want to blow my health away, because here's the thing, a lot of these diseases, congestive heart failure when you're 65 started when you're 25, right? Alzheimer's started when you're 25 and hits you when you're 70, right? Or even things that happen even faster, right? I don't want to throw away my health because that's the most important thing. Well, it's the precursor for everything else, but I also don't want to completely disregard relationships with people, romance, whatever, like that. It's like, I'm not going on a million dates, bro. That's not exciting to me. Occasionally, for me, that's not really that exciting. I mean, it's something where it's like, I don't want to be 35 and freaking nightclubs in Miami, right? I walk around the streets of Brickell, Miami is where I live, and I see, no shade, but like 42-year-old dudes being like, yo, we're at spring break, we're in Miami. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? You did not look at the diminishing return curves. And some people, it's like you had to do other things in your life to make like different reasons, and you're trying to relive it. I'm not trying to dunk on anyone or anything like that. I'm just saying that's not what I want to do. So for me, it's like, I'm not actively like spamming Hinge or anything, but occasionally, go on a date or something, just say hello, meet someone, maybe you meet a new friend, but maybe you do meet a partner. And you look also in there, it's like, okay, when you're 23 like me, it's like I'm also going to have pretty high standards of like, I want someone who's smart, I want someone who's interesting, I don't know all that. We'll see if I figured that out. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. We'll see. But it's all these things like with your friend, like I'm trying to be very intentional about, let me call some of my buddies for 30 minutes. I do not have any time during the day in my management. I need a CRM for my texts, man. But it's something where I'm trying very intentionally, like, okay, on the weekends, like, let me call my mom. Because also, man, like, I don't really talk about this on social. Maybe I'll talk about this on another Yap video, but like my dad died over a year ago. Like, I can't call him. You should call these people that matter. And like these friends, like even if you call them once a month for 15 minutes or 30 minutes, and guy friendships, you can kind of get away with that a bit more, but also don't let it slide. At the end of the day, if you look back, you go to a nursing home and talk to people who are 80, probably at the end of their life, right? Let's be real. And ask them what's important. Ask them what was exciting. It was like picking a good partner. The experiences you had, do things in your 20s you want to do in your 20s. The experiences that you had. The relationships, doesn't matter the amount of money. However, don't forget about money because it allows you to do more of this. Diminishing returns. You have multiple variables you got to optimize for at once. Optimal stopping. If you crank all the way on money and you disregard everything else, there's certain things that money cannot buy you back. You can't go back in time and redo this thing. You just can't do it. You simply can't do it. However, if you make, for me, if I'm looking at my life, I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to take a bit more risk because through social media, and especially through my business now, it's very cash flow, can have a lot of money coming in. I'm going to probably take a little bit more risk. One, venture investments. Well, listen to Naval Ravikant. He had a great podcast on angel investing. If you are okay with the illiquidity, so you can't just dump it tomorrow and get your cash out, so illiquid, not liquid, and you have good access to deal flow, which I have good mentors and gotten some pretty good companies, I'm going to say, then it's actually one of the best ways for if you look at your IRR, if you do a good job, it's one of the best ways to do it. But regardless of that, right, I want to take risk financially because, like, look, worst case, I'll do okay. And I'll still be able to have all these other things. Best case, I can do even more of the things that matter, such as when I'm 30 and I have kids. Who knows? Life is so many permutations, can't really figure that out. It's going to be something where I want to make sure that I can spend that time, and you need excess returns to do that. So, all right, well, I'm going to stomach the illiquidity because cash flow is fine, and just dump in these like angel investments, and then also a lot of these companies, I get a pretty good discount rate. If you guys know anything about venture, because I can go in there and be like, this is what you got to do for your go to market. This is what you got to do for your social media. I'm also going to connect you with this person, this person, this person. Boom, a lot of enterprise value added. So I get just half the time I actually get pretty good rates on these and pretty good deals on these. But you always got to think about diminishing returns. I do not want to just only work on my business. I might do more, right? You can think about in short windows. For me, I'm spending probably more time than I will on average, ideally, in my life on my business, on the wealth category. Because if I make a lot of money in my 20s, one, I can do more of the things in your 20s you want to do in your 20s, but also then I can control the rest of my life. If I'm intentional, don't want to fall for the money trap, man. I'm telling you, golden handcuffs are real. I grew up in this environment where, I was able to go to this boarding school. I went for free. I went for free because there's a rule that anyone in like a 20-mile radius can go for free. But I went to school with, I don't want to name names. It's not very classy of me, but a bunch of billionaire kids. And a lot of them, some of my best friends still to this day, but I look at the lives of a lot of these people that have all the money in the world, and they were fighting over semantics. They were going for who can have the bigger boat. You're losing the game of money. You're not playing it right. Money should be a tool for health, relationships, love, experiences. Should not just be I'm going to play the status game. Don't forget about status, though. Status isn't nothing, right? Your ability to make more money, your ability to potentially, at least subconsciously, attract a good mate. You don't want to attract someone who's just 100% on status, because then you're probably all the other things are not going right. Multi-variables, got to think about all the variables there. Status is important, but you don't want to diminishing returns. If you're at a point where you're buying a bigger yacht than the other guy, then you lost the game, because also you're probably not very happy. Your relationships are built on crap, let's be real. And you have all this money to do all these other things, but you're not thinking about optimizing it for, you're too single focused. Those are not happy people. People who lead empires, which if you're CEO of a company or a massive, you're leading an empire, you probably don't have a great life, right? Probably a lot of mental illness, self-selected groups. I want to do a whole video on psychology as well. It's a very wishy-washy field, but you should really look at it, right? Important things are self-selected groups. What are the personality traits that are more common in certain groups because people self-select to be them? Social media influencers. My friends are people I know in real life who have no relation to my business. And I have a couple friends who are in business with me, kind of related to business, because I like them. But I'm very intentional, I don't want my friend group to be a bunch of influencers, because social media influencers it's a self-selected group with a significantly higher, probably a 1, maybe even a 2 standard deviation, if you go back to that, for the dark triad, which is narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, right? It's not a good trait to have all your relationships have people high in this. You got to deal with some people with some higher levels. You need a bit of narcissism. You got to be a little bit more confident, right? I would say if I probably scored on these, I'd probably be higher on narcissism. It's probably true. I've posted 15,000 videos of me. I don't think I'm the most narcissistic person ever, but I at least acknowledge it. If you build a business, you are a narcissist because you believe with all the signals in the world saying, your ass, you can't do this, you still do it. You still do it, right? There's some amount of narcissism, that's part of it. I admit that, right? But that's still that self-selected group. You gotta be careful. You don't want that to be your entire friend group. And if you play too hard the money game and the status game, then if you're not careful with your love and relationships, that's gonna be your group. You always gotta be thinking multifaceted. You gotta think about, you have multivariable calculus, right? Calc 3, if you take that, right? You are no longer just in the XY axis. You have X, Y, Z, all these dimensions. And if you're finding an optimal point, you got to do the calculus. And I think that's really challenging. I don't even remember how to do that anymore, but I do remember intuitively. The big point of this is that you don't have to know any of the math specifically. You just need to understand intuitively. Understand expected value intuitively. Understand variance and 2 sigma deviations or whatever intuitively. Understand axioms and logic intuitively. Terence Tao, Analysis 1. Terence Tao is one of the smartest people out there. Genius by all technical measures. And he wrote an incredible book called Analysis 1. You can buy it for $50. You can probably find a pirated version, but you should get it regardless. Where it goes through analysis and it breaks it down and just, oh man. It starts at counting. Terence Tao starts you at counting, and by the end of the book, you're doing integrals. Because it takes it step by step and it shows you. Learn this. It's an application. You'll never really have to use it directly, but it teaches you really intuitively how do you think. Risk. How do you price risk? This is more of a finance topic, but math and finance, a lot of overlap. How are you pricing the risk of your decisions? Correlated here with expected value, very close. Just kind of 2 ways of looking at it in some way. And also your long-term return. Not just the EV of one moment, but how are you pricing your risk for your life, right? If you're all right, well, I'm not really going to think about it. I'm just going to marry this crazy person with all these personality traits that are a problem. You're not really pricing your risk correctly. I'm going to go into this career. I'm going to put my heads down. I'm going to be an accountant, and it's okay to be an accountant. An accountant teaches you a lot of great skills of being very type A. Well, it's usually you're type A if you're an accountant, but what's it called? There's a trait, conscientiousness. I've been talking for 40 minutes, so I'm gonna slur some words. Conscientiousness. Trait conscientiousness is attention to detail. I wish I had higher, and I'm working on it, but I have a great co-founder who is type A plus, highest levels of conscientiousness. Sometimes I need to step out and like think big picture and put random things together and swam sales relationships. But I need someone who's gonna make sure that like it's in the CRM. He's gonna like yell at me if the little thing the CRM's wrong. It's annoying the moment, but it's extremely important, right? I could go on for a while if you can't tell. If you can't tell, I've wanted to have a Yap channel. And also, why am I doing a Yap channel? You gotta think about funnels. I'll talk about this later as well. They got people, 250 million views. I'm probably gonna get 1,000 views on this. But for the people who make it to the end, it's like you built this relationship with me. Maybe you wanna go into business. Maybe you're a startup founder, you can give me a pretty good discount rate. Maybe, if you're a girl and you watch this entire video and you like anything I said, then we might be a great match. you know what I'm saying? Like, you gotta think about where this fits in the funnel and why I'm doing it. And one, obviously, high narcissism. I like to hear myself speak, apparently, right? Well, at least I try to be thinking about it, right? The point of this is, even if you don't go to school for math, it's a great degree, because then it's really like the point of me getting a math degree was like, I don't know what I want to do at that point. I was still only doing YouTube. I didn't have the business. I didn't have anything else. I was like, but it will teach me how to think, and it makes me sound like a smart person, regardless if that's true or not. It makes you sound like a smart person, and you can figure it out, right? Even if you're not going to college, or you've gone to college, or you have a different major for some reason, I would say go through a fundamental probability class. Don't even really worry about doing too many of the problems. Just intuitively understand it. Analysis 1 by Terrence Tao. Just grind through it. It'll really teach you. If you can intuitively understand these concepts and think through your decisions in a more qualitative way through a quantitative lens, right? Don't think of like, if I'm gonna ask out this girl, there's a 0.8% on my scale of a negative EV. Don't think about the numbers too, but like gut check of like, is this positive or negative EV? And really think through it. If you can take a quantitative framework to qualitative decisions without being too stupid, like being like, I'm gonna make a whole number or something, your life will improve. Because big picture, if the decisions you make are net positive EV with all the variance and all the unknown unknowns, the scariest, the ones I try to avoid, Donald Rumsfeld's speech, great guy, maybe not, but whatever. If you can at least have generally net EV on everything you're doing, you'll have a decent life if you calculate your expected value correctly. Here's the thing, going back to diminishing returns, and this is the last thing I'll leave you with, because I have plenty more to yap about on the Yap channel, but I'll do that for another week. If you are calculating your expected value, you need to think about it for all the things you're optimizing for, big picture. Well, in small decisions, you can be one faceted EV, like one variable. But generally, if the sum of your decisions are positive EV on wealth, and you've forgotten everything else, then it's actually true negative EV. Because your expected value and what you're calculating and optimizing for should genuinely be for what you want in life. Your health, your wealth, to do these other things, your love, so romance, probably good to have a partner. Some people don't need it, but I do, I'll tell you that. Your relationships, what matters, your experiences, and also your happiness in general. Happiness is a hard thing. Sigmund Freud wasn't right about everything, but a genius. Civilizations and its discontents. I think that's the name. Chapter 2, read through it on happiness, extremely interesting. Generally, if you have all those components of health, wealth, love, all that, your happiness will be pretty good. It's more of a byproduct, I've found. Or you just take a drug and you feel good. It's actually like for some, if your neurons are screwed up, man, like it's not a bad idea to just maybe try it. But try these things first. Get these in check. Then figure that out. I want you to be a happy person. Whatever it takes. I actually have no shade on anything. I love pharma. I love big pharma. Everyone hates them. Pricing can be bad, but some of the most amazing discoveries ever, right? I'm not a big hater on that. But let me leave you with this. Think about your expected value. That's the one thing you should think about. And within that, do not optimize for one thing and forget everything else. Think about what actually matters in your life. Think about it holistically. I will be yapping on this channel about more things. I have plenty of thoughts about plenty of things, if you can't already tell. If you are a business owner, you have a good business doing $1 to $10 million per year plus, and you're interested in getting more top of funnel leads, just go to pugs.media. You can book a call with me. If you're a startup founder or you're raising money and you have an interesting idea, I want to see a little bit more proof, and you think I can be valuable, because I'm going to ask for a discount, message me directly on Instagram saying, yo, like, and you can literally say angel investment dash, I watched your video, let's chat. I always want to talk with people. If you do not fall into any of those categories, but you're interesting, also message me. If you're a girl, so stupid I'm even saying this, but it matters because you got to optimize for everything, man. And you made it this far and you agree with me, not even if you agree with me, but you like these topics, maybe hit me up too. Because if you like these topics, you're probably not an idiot, and that's going to pass on, and that's always important. Anyways, I've gone on too long. It is 2 a.m. on a Saturday, and I've gone for 46 minutes. So I think it's about time I wrap up. A couple other topics on the plate. How my dad dying changed how I looked at things. I think that's an interesting one. I want to talk about angel investing and risk. I think a whole thing about risk is really interesting. I talk about social media. I have a business channel for social media where I just yap about social media only, so probably won't do it on this channel. And also other life things. I always liked it when the YouTubers or influencers or random people that I followed had these separate channels where they went on forever about random topics. I love those the most. So I'm doing it for the 1% of my audience that likes that. And I think it's time that I wrap up this video. I'll be posting more on this channel if you can't already tell. All right, that's about it. Subscribe or something. Like and subscribe. Haha. All right, peace.